Okay, so your memory of George. Action.
So memories about Grandpa.
So you should say like, this is what I remember about Grandpa, or something I remember
Okay.
about Grandpa, and then go into it.
I remember always thinking he was so wise, just that he knew the answers to everything.
Grandpa was always a hard worker. That's most of my memories with Grandpa is him being at the farm, working on the farm when I would visit Grandpa. And I remember one time having gone out to see the potato field, and I think I came back hungry, and so Grandpa, I think I said something about being hungry, and Grandpa said, well, why didn't you eat a potato while you were in the field? And I said, well, they're raw. I wouldn't eat a potato in the field. And he's like, he said, well, I would eat a potato. I eat the potatoes in the field. And I thought he was joking, so I laughed. And he's like, no, I really do.
We were on the houseboat, and he was taking a small group down to see the Rainbow Bridge, and so I knew that he hadn't had any breakfast, and before I got in the boat, I had grabbed a piece of waffle that was left over, and I thought, I'll take this and make sure that George gets something to eat. And we started taking off, and I held up this piece of waffle. Here, George, this is for you. And it passed it to several people, and it got back to the engine driver, George, and he took it, looked at it. He didn't see any syrup. He didn't see any jam or any strawberries or anything on it. And he promptly threw it into the water. And I was just mortified. I thought, oh, all that effort to try to get him something, and he did that to it.
That's gratitude. I could just see him doing that.
Oh, it completely surprised me. I had no idea that he had to have something on his waffle before he ate it.
My favorite memory, there's two favorite memories I have of Grandpa Lovell. One was when I was 8 years old and broke my leg and was in the hospital. He came and brought me a little chess set, Radio Shack chess set that I could play by myself with computerized, and that's where I learned to play chess. And I love that chess set. I spent much of that week that I was in there learning to play chess. And then my other memory I have of him is...
And you still have that chess set.
And I still have it, that's right. My other favorite memory of him is I rode down from Idaho to Utah with him on one occasion, and I don't remember the context, but I just remember talking with him and being awed at how many people he knew, and I could just tell the love that he felt for all the people that he talked about as we passed different areas, and he mentioned who he knew in this town and that town. And was amazed at how many people that this great man, who certainly had a lot of opportunities through service to get to know people, but otherwise from a pretty small community, just how many people he knew in a lot of different areas. And that was a telling of who he was as an individual, that he loved people and that he cared for people a lot.
So many of my memories of Grandpa Lovell are of him telling stories, and I can still hear his voice in my mind of just the stories he would talk about in his family and in his church calling.
I remember always looking forward to birthdays and the visits that Grandma would make on our birthdays when they'd come over. And Grandpa would always have his birthday spankings for us. He'd lay us across his lap, and he'd roll up his magazine and give us our birthday spankings. Have each year of our age, and then he died on a few at the end. One, because I loved him. 2, to grow older. I don't remember them all, but I remember really looking forward to that visit with them and just how special that was to have them there.
I remember Grandpa helping us ride horses at the ranch.
One time we were walking in Idaho, and I was young. I was probably like 7 years old, but I still remember it really clearly. And we were walking and I saw his hand and I was like, "Grandpa, what happened to your hand?" And he said, "Well, it was a Sunday and my dog, well, he ran out of food and I couldn't go buy food because it was Sunday, and so I just fed him my thumb, just chopped it right off and fed it to him." And I really was in shock, and I thought, wow, he's a really faithful saint. And I believed that until I was 12.
I have claustrophobia, there's no doubt about it. That's the only real phobia I have, but I have claustrophobia. And to hear George tell his story of climbing down that irrigation pipe hundreds of feet, I can hardly stand to hear it. He got clear down there and had to back out, and boy, that is a strong emotion.
I remember sleeping at his house and spending a night in their bedroom there. And I think I was pretty young because I was kind of scared to sleep outside of Dad's house. And I remember staying the night with them and having breakfast with him in the morning. And we had bread and milk for breakfast, which I never had, but apparently is something that Dad grew up having often. And Grandpa, I don't know why I remember this, but I remember distinctly Grandpa having his button-up shirt with the Western style buttons.
When I think of Grandpa Lovell, I don't have the years and years of memories, but whenever I think of Grandpa, I only knew him after his stroke. So, like, the first thing I think of is always how he greeted with lots of hugs, and he always seemed very excited to see us and our kids, and he was always very loving and kind to me. And I also, when I think of him, I think of the frustration he had trying to speak, and it would often result in swearing. And I could always hear the swear, and it just always made me laugh because he's a farmer and farmers swear, and it just reminded me of being home, growing up with a bunch of farmers.
One Christmas they were over Christmas Eve celebrating Grandma's birthday, and they were at our house, and Grandpa told a story about when he got a pocket knife for Christmas because his mom had told him that they were too poor, that they wouldn't have anything for Christmas, they didn't have any money, and they had got stuff, they got some presents for his little sisters. And then she said, "Did you check the tree for yourself?" And he said, like, "I know there's nothing there." And she said, "Well, go ahead and check it anyway." And there was a pocket knife, and it was like, it was one of his most memorable, just like really, really happy Christmas for him. So I remember that story because I remember his voice telling that he had this really distinct voice. And then it was just probably 2 years after that that he had a stroke and lost his ability to talk. So that's how I remember what his voice sounded like.
Now looking back, I realize how wise he was. And we were at the ranch, and Tim and I were riding a four-wheeler together, and there was a sand pile, I guess, at the ranch that we used to like to jump on the four-wheeler. And Grandpa had told us not to jump the sand pile, but Tim and I think it was me actually, said, "Tim, let's go jump the sand pile." And so we drove over to it and we jumped it, and the four-wheeler flipped and it landed on top of me. And Tim, he flew off, but he got burned when his hand or his foot, I think, got burned, and I was fine. But he had to run back and get Grandpa to come help. And I remember thinking we are in so much trouble. But I think the only thing Grandpa said was something like, "I told you not to jump the sand pile." And he didn't get mad. He just I mean, I'm sure he was glad we were okay, and he was a 4-wheeler off me, but I remember just like being so embarrassed that I had disobeyed, and just realizing like that I should listen to my grandpa and do what he was talking about.
I remember the two things he used to eat: popcorn and disgusting Jordan almonds that I never liked. But I always tried whenever I went there, thinking that I would like them again. They were always gross.
Another one of my favorite memories is just going over there Sunday afternoons to visit and just hanging out at their house. And sometimes we'd go play our piano songs for them that we had learned. But mostly I just remember sitting around their living room eating popcorn and mixed nuts and listening to Grandpa tell stories and always being amazed by his crazy stories.
Maybe my most recurring memory of Grandpa Lovell is his how he calmly faced everything, and he just seemed imperturbable. He seemed to take everything in stride, and at the same time he didn't do anything small. I guess it kind of goes with the territory with running a huge farm, but I remember when we first moved to Idaho, he was just buying the ranch, and and then he said, oh, let's put in a golf course, and he put in a golf course, and let's put in a slide, and he put in a slide, and he didn't go small. And I just was in awe of that everything he decided to do, it seemed like he could do it, and he'd do it well, and these huge projects just seemed to get accomplished. So that's what I remember. That I don't think I ever saw him, I'm sure he got that way, I don't think I ever saw him though overexcited about anything. He was just always very, very calm and very collected.
There was an occasion when we were out in the channel and we were forced to stay in the channel overnight, but George was not there.
You might mention that there was a dreadful storm in the middle of the night.
Yes, and the boat was, our boat was hitting a rock all the time and tossing back and forth, and we knew that he was alone in the boat, and all night long I just worried about him because I knew that he was just probably down in the next canyon all by himself for the night.
One of probably my most special memory is the Sunday that Dad was going to get sustained as bishop. Mom, Dad, him and I went over to Grandpa's so Dad could tell him that he was going to be a bishop, and Christy was there too. And it was a really special experience. We read, Grandpa at that point, this was just a few weeks before he passed, and he couldn't speak very well, and it was clear that he'd been in more pain than normal, but you could just tell he was so proud of Dad, and he couldn't speak, so we pulled out his autobiography and read about when he was called, I can't remember if it was state president or bishop, but read about that experience, and it was really powerful. And I just thought about like what a great heritage that Dad had coming from Grandpa, that he served in Callings for so many years and gave just everything he had to the gospel, and then that Dad was carrying on that legacy. So that was just like a really tender experience with Grandpa.
Well, because I didn't know him very well, it's been interesting where we live in Rexburg now. I tell people I married a Lovell. They say, oh, are you related to the Ryrie Lovells? And so they tell me things about Grandpa, where they say, oh, he was state president, or he told me, he sent me on my mission. So these are all people that are obviously going to tell me that. I'll talk about what a great leader he was. So even though I didn't know him, I think probably the best compliment that he can give is that even though he's passed on, these people still revere him, still think of him.
One that day after the ranch, there was you remember that water slide where they had the pump and ran water down? And there was some big piece of equipment or something. I don't even remember what it was made out of, iron pipe, and it got bent. And I remember he had on cowboy boots. You know, he was what, 70 or 75 years old at this time. Had on cowboy boots. Doggone it, the guy, he laid down on the ground and he kicked that thing 3 or 4 or 5 times, trying to kick it into shape. I don't think he made a dent in it, but he was sure trying. Wow, yeah, there was one mighty tough guy.
Yeah, he was tough.
You know, he was a great guy. I loved him.